Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Cryptic Conversations. I'm your host, Tunes from the Crypt. We have another very special episode in store today. Today's guest is Sol Manalo, the founder of One, a platform dedicated to guiding people on their journeys of self-discovery, healing, and creative expression. Drawing from her own personal experience overcoming depression and anxiety, Sol discovered the transformative power of Reiki. Through her platform, Sol offers a variety of services, including Reiki, sound baths, and workshops designed to empower others on their paths to self-love and peace. She has a fascinating story, one that I think you will take a lot out of, and I'm honored to have her with us today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. So to kick this episode off, I thought it would be cool. I just talk about how we met. So yeah, I mean, it was the Lionsgate Portal. So what was that? That was August 8th. And, you know, I've been on my spiritual journey. I've been exploring sound healings lately. And I just looked up, I was on Eventbrite and I was just like looking up different sound healings in LA or whatever. And yours was one that kind of stood out to me, I think because of the branding and stuff. And I like the fact that it was outdoors as well. But yeah, so I met her at the sound healing on August 8th. It was a Lionsgate Portal. And I remember as I was sitting there, like you were sitting there in the front getting ready to lead the discussion, and we were waiting for people to come. And I was kind of eavesdropping on the discussion that you were having with the girl next to you. And that's when I knew I was like, oh, I'm at the right place, because I heard you talking about past lives, and I heard you talking about, I think you said your son or something, you know, like left a book out, or I don't know if you remember that story.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember.
So, yeah, you know, talk to us a little bit about that day, you know, the Lionsgate portal and that kind of a thing.
Yeah, so the Lionscape Portal has been every year pretty much I've been holding space. The energy is very intense that day. It's a really great day to just tune into ourselves, a great day to call in whatever it is that we want in our lives. It's the number 8 is very significant for me. One of my close friends who actually passed a couple of years ago, his birthday was on 8/8 too. And so he taught me a lot about the portal, and I've always just connected with the energy that day. And so it's been very like transformative to hold these spaces for people and for them to be able to have that space to go inward and experience the energy for themselves. And I always tell people, like, no matter what day it is, we always have access to these portals and high
Oh yeah.
vibrational frequencies, and this energy is always available to us. But I feel when we're collectively putting so much energy towards a certain day, then that energy can be heightened, as well as like the things that go on astrologically and in the stars. But for me, it's just been a very powerful day. And I always hold sound baths usually on like portal days. So like 11/11 is coming up, or on 1/11 or 2/2. So it's been pretty cool to do that over the last few years.
Yeah, I love that. I do remember the energy that day being very intense. And I had something crazy happen that day. I think I told you guys, and I didn't want to like bring bad vibes or anything, but it was like something that I experienced, you know, like it happened, you know, and it was like as I was driving, I think I told you, as I was driving on the freeway to go to the sound bath, there was a homeless guy like in the depths of like mental illness, and he was on the freeway running towards oncoming traffic, and I had to swerve out of the way. Like I had never had that happen. It was crazy. It was like I could feel the energy that day. It was very wild. So I'd like to ask you, you know, so you know, talk to me about your early life, you know, where you grew up, where you went to school, and what your family was like.
Yeah, so I grew up in this very small town that almost no one ever hears about, but it's called Northfield, and it's just outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And so I grew up in this town. It was primarily like white kids. I remember growing up and being one of like the only colored kids. And color was never a thing to me. I wasn't aware of like, oh, I'm different or I look different from everyone else until more like colored people started coming to our school district, probably in like 5th grade. I did start off in a Catholic school, which was very interesting. My family is very Catholic. I grew up in a Filipino household. And so growing up, they were very much like, well, it's more so my grandparents. My mom was, she's more like Americanized, I guess you can say. Like she moved here when she was very young. I think she was like only 4 years old. But my grandparents, they're very like traditional Filipinos. And so every Sunday it was like, you need to go to church. If you don't go to church, you're in trouble. And on Tuesdays, make sure you go to your Bible study. So that was very much like pushed on me growing up. And then when I got to third grade, my mom finally decided to put me into public school. And that was completely different for me compared to going to a Catholic school where I had to wear like uniform and we're reading the Bible all day and going to mass, during lunchtime. And so there was a huge shift from going from Catholic to private or to public school. And I guess like just growing up, I never really felt like I belonged. I always had a lot of friends. And I feel like people from the outside looking in were like, oh, she's always happy and, she gets along with everyone. But deep down, I just felt very, very different. And I didn't know why. I started experiencing a lot of depression at a young age because of my parents divorcing. So my parents divorced when I was about 5 years old. So that like caused a lot of like abandonment wounds in me because my mom was raising three kids and like working all the time. Sometimes there would be points where she would have three jobs a day. And so we never would see her. So it'd be like my grandparents watching us or my titas or like my uncles and cousins. And then my dad moved to LA and was like back and forth, but primarily here. And so I was always like, where are my parents? Like, why don't they love me? Although my mom was working hard for us, but I just didn't understand that. So I feel like I projected a lot, even at a very young age, into my friendships or relationships of like these trust issues or not feeling like, I was loved. So,
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I find a lot of us, spiritual people definitely have, things that happen in our childhood and different troubles and stuff. I feel like most people have them in reality. So, would you say, like, currently, do you identify as being Catholic or no?
no, I
Yeah,
don't. Yeah, no, I wouldn't say I'm religious at all. I honor and like respect, all religions, but I have definitely found like the oneness in it all. So I would say I'm more like spiritual, but I don't even call myself spiritual. I just
yeah,
am, So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I love that. I can relate as well. So, what would you say, like, what was the catalyst that led you to start your healing journey?
The catalyst was definitely, I would say it was a car accident that I was in. So I was 19. I was in a really toxic relationship all of high school. And so my freshman year of college, we were kind of like on the brinks of breaking up, but we were still dealing with each other and just a lot of toxic arguments. And so I remember I was going through this period where I kept thinking about what would it feel like. I had this weird obsessive thought of like, what would it feel like to get in an accident? Like, would I feel it? And I would almost like picture myself getting in an accident every time I'd get in the car. And I remember one day I was thinking like, oh, me and my boyfriend were gonna get in a bad fight. And we did. And this is crazy, but he like broke my door handle off of my car that night, trying to get into the car. And I remember sitting there obsessing over the thought of like, how am I going to explain this to my grandparents? Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to tell them like what happened. And so that next morning, I had to go to work. I was a manager at this clothing store at a mall, and it was like downpour raining. And I remember getting in that car being like, what if I get in an accident today? And also obsessing at the same time of like, what's going to happen with my car? And so, literally, minutes later, I get on the freeway and I just start hydroplaning and spin out, and my car like caught onto this guardrail, like going closer to this bridge and spun me out. And I remember being in such shock. I like stopped in the center lane. And mind you, I work 25 minutes away. It's like you can't even see the road ahead of you because of the rain. And the first thing I thought was like, oh my gosh, I need to get to work. It was very like 3D, like no one's gonna open the store. But long story short is I got into this bad accident without even going to check on first checking in with myself or checking my car. But I literally just turned my car on and just kept driving.
Oh
Um,
my,
literally kept driving. And I remember people stopping when I was still stopped, like, let me call 911 for you. Like, let me get an ambulance. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm like in such shock. And I just remember this like Honda Civic was on my ass the whole way, 25 minutes. And then there were two cars side by side. And I remember thinking like they must have seen the accident or like want to talk to me to make sure I'm good. And so I get off of the freeway 25 minutes later, pull into the mall. And this is in Ohio. So it's like there's no parking structures, like open parking lot. And this Honda follows me into the parking lot. And I remember getting out of the car to go talk to them. And as soon as I get out of my car, this Honda is completely like nowhere to be found. And I was like, there's no way. I'm like, even if they were to have drove off, I would have seen them from the main road. Like, there's no way that they could have left from the time I got out of the car. And so I was like, this is so weird. And I walk around the back of my car and I like have no back of my car. Like there's my trunk's completely smashed in, my brake lights were non-existent. Like everything was it was just effed. And so I was like, I was so protected. Like something like someone was sent down to like drive me to work to make sure I got here. And so then the next day I remember talking to one of my close friends at the time and he was telling me about the book The Secret and like law of attraction. And he's like, I feel like you've been manifesting your reality without you like consciously knowing it. And I was like, this is crazy. I have been. I've been thinking about these accidents. I've been thinking about how toxic my relationship is. And I'm manifesting all of these negative experiences. And I was like, wait, if I can manifest all these negative experiences, then I can do the complete opposite. And
Hmm.
so this is at 19, and everything slowly started to shift for me. Like, and it was crazy. And I would say maybe until about 21 is until I had like my actual spiritual awakening. But from 19 to 21, it was more of like surface level spirituality, like, oh, I'm not going to really dive deep and address my, you know, problems and my wounds. I'm still going to sweep it under the rug, but I'm also going to be more mindful of where I'm putting my energy. So it was a very interesting time.
Wow. That's crazy. You're tripping me out. I don't know if you know my story too, that it was also a car accident. Did you know that? You
Really?
didn't know that?
No.
And it was the
Mm-mm.
same thing. It was in the rain and I hydroplaned across the freeway I was on the far lane, like to get off the freeway. And it was raining and my tires were bald and I knew I needed new tires and I hydroplaned across the whole freeway and I flipped upside down and
Whoa.
I hit the back of my car and I flipped upside down. And similar to you, man, when I came out of that car accident, it was bad. Like people on the freeway saw it too. And when I came out of it, I was like checking my limbs and everything. I was like, all right, I'm alive. Like, okay. And I remember being awake for the whole thing too. Like I didn't black out. Like
Hmm.
I saw it and then I was upside down. And next thing I know, I'm on my car and I got out and I wasn't spiritual before that. Like, you know, after that, I felt like guardian angels or something like was looking out for me because it was such a
Yeah.
bad accident and I came out completely fine. Actually, I had a minor fractured rib, but that healed like in like 6 weeks or whatever. So, and I also, you know, with the secret and stuff, I got into the secret in my early 20s. And so, yeah, there's a lot of interesting connections between us. And I don't often hear about people having like a spiritual awakening because of a car accident. Usually it's something else. So I'm enjoying, you know, hearing that. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
relate to you on that.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I'm glad you're good. Like we're definitely here for a reason, but it definitely is like a wild thing, especially like you said, like you were awake for it all. And that's how it felt. I was like in it and I was like, oh my gosh, like when am I gonna stop spinning? Like I didn't know what it was just everything
Oh
happened
man.
so fast.
Yeah.
And so it's just really wild that we were actually like in it and experienced it. So
Yeah. Yeah, for me in my 20s, it was a lot of drinking, a lot of raving
hmm.
and partying and all that and the I got another accident after that, but I wasn't driving that time and you know, that's where my sobriety started, you know, cuz I should have been driving and I let my friend drive my car cuz I was too drunk to drive and he crashed my car and so after that I got sober. I said, you know what, enough's enough, dude. You got to grow up, dude. It's like it's time to change, you know what I mean? So I got sober and I did some therapy and then I did ayahuasca and then just I'm
Wow.
a completely different person after that. So yeah. So, you know, I feel like you're more than just a sound healer though. So like how do you, you know, amongst all the noise and labels, you know, like how do you define yourself in the work that you do?
I guess like when it comes to defining myself, I feel like I said it earlier, like I just am. And it was really in the beginning of my journey of like awakening and like coming, like activating all of these gifts that I had and remembering who I was. I remember like someone asking me, like, so what's your brand? Like, what's your image? And I was like, I don't have a brand. Like, I don't have an image. And they were getting frustrated with me because they're like, I get what you're saying, but like, really though, like, what is your thing? And I'm just like, it's hard for me to put myself in a box because there's so many things that I do. Like, I'm a creative.
Mm,
Produce music, but then I also create visuals and then, the healing work that I do.
yeah.
But in my awakening, like when I was 21 and like on LSD, I remember hearing this very loud voice, like, you are here to co-create this new earth and like change all of these systems. And I'm like, wait, what? What do you mean? I'm in school for fashion and I'm gonna be a luxury streetwear designer. And I'm like, this is insane. But
Wow.
I just knew like it was put in me. I heard it, I felt it, that just like you
Wow.
are here for this bigger picture and everything will make sense. Just continue to follow and live your truth. So I was like, all right then. And that's what I've been doing. So
Wow. Do you think that was God or your higher self or what was that?
yeah, it was just source energy. Like it just felt like the one. And I felt so connected to that. And during that trip, I just remember experiencing that oneness and never feeling that or experiencing that before. And so that was such a crazy and intense feeling of like, okay, wow, I am the trash on the ground and I am the beautiful lights outside and I am
Wow.
the trees. And so having that experience was like, I can literally be anything that I want to be, you know? So
Wow, I love that. Yeah, like on my journey, and I've met with so many spiritual coaches and doing the podcast and all that. And people have called me, "Oh, you're a starseed. Oh, you're a light worker, and oh, you're an intuitive empath." And I'm similar to you. Like I've been throwing all these labels, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I really identify with those. I don't really have any proof that I'm a starseed or whatever. Like people just told me that, so I am what I am, and I'm just on the journey, so I can relate to you on that. So I'd like to ask you, so how did Reiki and sound healing become such a pivotal part of your life and your platform?
yeah, so with Reiki, I remember I was already pregnant with my first son, and this was a little bit after I dropped out of school. I was in my senior year of college. I dropped out because I was like, let me follow this calling. And I remember laying in bed and being like, tell me what it is, because I've already gotten that voice in my head, like, you're here to change the world and do all these things. And I'm like, okay, like I need something more tangible. Like, where do I start? Or like how can I really step on this path? And so I just sat there in meditation and nothing was coming through, but I was like, you know what, I'm gonna trust that it's gonna like come to me when it's supposed to. And so I come out of meditation and I pick up my phone and get on like Instagram or Facebook or something, and then this ad pops up and it's a Reiki ad. And I was like, I felt so drawn to it, but I never heard of what Reiki was. And so I was like, let me look this up and see what this energy healing is. And so I found a class in Cleveland, and it was like a couple weeks away. And I was like, let me just sign up. Like, I have no idea what it is, but for some reason I feel called. And I did. And I showed up. I was the only person in the class, and it completely changed my life and just my perspective on a lot. And then soon after, I came to LA. Well, that was like in 2017, but in 2020, I moved here. And I was teaching meditation classes while infusing Reiki. And then a good friend of mine was like, hey, I have a gift for you. And he's like, I feel like you're going to use this in the future. And it was a sound bowl. And I was like, oh, I never really thought about doing sound healing. He's like, no, just, this is for you. And so I brought it to a meditation class about a year later. And then it was like over with. I just felt so connected to the sound. And I already love music. But I was like, oh my gosh, this is so transformative to be able to hold space and like guide people and hold space for people to heal through energy and sound. So I integrate the two, and it's been super transformative.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, that ad that popped up was definitely like a synchronicity. It was calling to you and for you to pursue.
Yeah.
I love hearing about stories like that. My hypnotherapist had a similar story where she said she was working at Amoeba Records in Hollywood, and she was like, making minimum wage, and she knew that she was destined for more, and she was just like stressed out and she was ready to quit or whatever. And she walks into the bathroom, and there was a magazine open directly to an ad that said, get your career in hypnotherapy. And she was like, that was her calling, and now she pursues
Wow.
it ever since. And yeah, so I love hearing about stories like that. So I'd like to ask you too, so how do you take care of your own energy and your own well-being while facilitating healing for others?
So for me, it's really about one, always keeping my energy protected. So everything for me is like intention and trust. And so I literally will just set an intention that I'm protected, whether that's, saying that intention to myself, or sometimes I'll like visualize this like shield around me, but I always feel protected. And I always tell like whether it's my clients or my students or just people in general, like energetic hygiene is so important. Like you don't realize that no matter who you come in contact, you could be at the grocery store or
Oh
at the
yeah.
gas station and you're walking past these people. And if you're not protecting your energy, you can be taking on their energy and carrying
Oh
that
yeah.
with you. And so I work with a lot of energy. So for me, it's like I have to make sure I'm, with that intent of going into it, like, okay, I'm protected. And then afterwards, just setting the intention that all of my energy is clear and whatever isn't mine, I detach from, I disconnect from that person. And there are times where I will work with very heavy energy or a group class where it's like intense. And maybe, I come home and I'm not as intentional about protecting my energy and I will feel it. Like whether I get sick after or I get super sad and depressed and I'm like, where is this coming from? But it'll be
Oh,
like, oh, because that session was super intense and I didn't give myself that space to like really detach and clear. So yeah, it's really important for me to, just as important it is to take a shower, I'm like, let me check in with myself. And even starting my day, like before, like I don't even sleep with my phone in the room. I keep it
uh,
out. And so it's like before, getting in contact with other people or getting on social media or even eating, I'm literally in bed, just grounding and connecting with my own energy. So I know where I'm at. And so that way, like when I do go on about my day, if anything shifts, I'm like more aware and able to identify, like, okay, that's where this energy came from, or that's where that came from. So definitely starting my day and grounding in my own energy.
yeah, I love that, and for me, it's been kind of a similar thing where I was always sensitive. I would label myself as sensitive to people's energy. And it makes me realize, like, looking back on my life, like, that's why I drank all the time. Cause being around
Mm,
people and stuff, like now that I don't drink, I'm like more introverted. Like, I don't really, spend as much time with people and stuff. Like, I needed that to like be around people's energy and stuff. And, you know, I just, I would describe myself as very sensitive. And to touch on what you were talking about, it's like it makes you realize how we are all one, right?
hmm.
Our energy rubs off on each other. We are all one. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. So yeah. So you're the sound healing that I did with you in August, I think that was my fourth sound healing. So the first one I did was over Zoom. Shout out to Sourcefield Sound. She's in the Bay Area, and that kind of opened me up to it. Then I did another one at a hotel in Hollywood. And then I wanted to ask you, are you familiar with the Integratron?
So many people have told me about it. They're like, you need to go and check
You
it
need to
out.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
you gotta go over there and check it out. It's in Joshua Tree.
Yeah. Yeah, I've
You've heard
definitely heard about it. Yeah.
do you know about the history of it?
No, I don't.
Yeah,
I'm
so
down to know.
it was in the early 1900s. It was this guy, I forget his name, but he was like a businessman, and there was like a tiny little airstrip out there in the desert where planes could land and stuff like that, like a little private airport, I guess you could call it. Anyways, the guy had a story. He said he was visited by a UFO. He was visited by some aliens or whatever, and they gave him the technology to literally build a time machine. And so he had the blueprints, and he started building this time capsule, this time machine. And from my research, I found that I think time travel is possible with it's using sound somehow, using
Mhm.
vibration, right? And so he started building this time machine or whatever, and then he mysteriously died. So I think, whatever, the government or whatever, they didn't want him to, put that out. And then so it got passed along through his family, so his family, I don't know if it's his daughters or granddaughters or whatever who own the estate now, that land. And you can go over there and I think it was like 30, 40 bucks and go do a sound healing. And it's the acoustics in that chamber is amazing, man. You gotta
Wow.
check it out.
Yeah, I did not know the backstory. So now I'm definitely intrigued and I'm like, I
Yeah.
want to go.
So
Yeah,
so yeah,
that's wild.
tell the listeners about, some of the instruments and sound modalities that you incorporate into your healing sessions and why.
Yeah, so I feel really drawn to the crystal bowls. And I actually had a set of like the Tibetan bowls before my friend gifted me the crystal bowl, but it was more for like personal use. But it wasn't until the quartz bowls where I was like, this feels amazing. And then I feel very drawn to the rain stick. I feel a lot of energy shift and move with like percussion. And so even like the drums and then like chimes. So I'm very much like simple. It's just my crystal bowls, the chimes, my rain stick. I'll use like a steel tongue drum in some of my sessions. But I have been experimenting at home. I don't have anything out yet, but I also like play piano. So, and like I was saying, like I'll make beats and stuff. So I've been experimenting with other stuff as well and like integrating my bowls and stuff with it.
Nice. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty unique. Yeah, like it started with me like a couple of years ago. I bought one of these tuning forks. This one's the
Mm,
528 hertz. So I'll use this every now and then. And then my sister bought me randomly out of nowhere, bought me one of these little, Tibetan
yeah.
singing bowls. So I'd actually like to learn as well to do the singing bowls and all that. Um,
Yeah.
so let's talk more about your spiritual journey. Like, so would you say that you underwent a spiritual awakening? And what has that journey been like?
Yeah, it definitely went on my spiritual awakening, like I said, was at 21. I was on LSD, and my brother, my youngest brother, actually was like telling me like, "Hey, I feel like you should just go on a journey." He's like, "I feel like it's something that you would, you could find a lot of these answers." Because I was at that time, that's when I was like questioning school and just what I wanted to do in life. And he's like, "Just take some space for yourself." And so I went on a trip with him and completely changed my life. I had this moment where I was like looking for chapstick in my purse. And I was one of those girls who had like a big purse with like a bunch of junk in it. And so I was going through it, and I remember just feeling this like heavy energy going down my spine. And I remember feeling this like ick of like, why are you carrying so much junk and this weight and none of this matters? And I just had this like breakdown and I threw it on the ground. And then I just went down this whole rabbit hole of like, what is life? Why are we being lied to? Like, we are meant to be free and we're sitting here, killing ourselves trying to survive. And so I went through this whole thing where I was like looking at all of the systems, whether it's like healthcare, education, the government, everything, the food. And I was like, it's all been an illusion. And so I had that whole realization and then also had that experience of reaching that awareness of oneness. And I was like, whoa, this is wild. Like, we have this power to, even though, I was on a substance, it's like we can still reach these altered states of consciousness. And so after having that huge awakening and really questioning everything, I began to like go on this deep journey of really rediscovering myself. And so there were a lot of moments or times where I would go on these trips by myself. It was almost like LSD for me was like the school of life. It helped me reach these different altered states of consciousness for me to really understand what this human experience is and also beyond the human experience. And so I also started to like disassociate with the world, which, wasn't good. I don't like using the word good or bad, but it got to a point where I was like, okay, if I'm going to be here and I'm going to choose to have this human experience, then have the human experience. If I'm going to go around saying, oh, nothing matters and, F this and F that, then what's the point? And so I did have to kind of ground myself. So I, took a break off of, the psychedelics and was able to, through meditation, still reach these altered states of consciousness. And I remember I was actually on a mushroom trip and had this whole realization. It was like the mushrooms were talking to me, and it was like, you don't need us. Like, you can literally reach these states without us. It's almost like we're just this reminder for you to be able to tap into that. And so I was like, oh, that's pretty wild. And so I started playing with that, and yeah, everything just started to like expand and expand and expand. It was pretty crazy.
I love that. And that's great advice. Like I noticed at the ayahuasca retreat, like I would hear different people and they're like, yeah, I've done 12 ayahuasca retreats this year and stuff like that. And I'm like at some point, yeah, it's a slippery slope. You got to be careful. Like that could just become another habit, another addiction, like
Hmm.
doing these things. So, I had a guy on my podcast and he said psychedelics are like a tool. It's like an initiation. Like
Yeah.
you get initiated and then that's it. Like you don't really need to do it again. Maybe every now and then, you know what I mean? But
Hmm.
like you shouldn't be making a habit out of it. Like you said, you can gain that wisdom again by, meditation and other practices. So I like that
Yeah.
advice. So I feel like a lot of people are waking up, quote unquote, waking up.
Mhm.
How would you define a spiritual awakening and everything that's happening right now?
Um, I really don't have a defined definition of what a spiritual awakening is, just because it can look and feel different for everyone. But I guess ultimately, the spiritual awakening is just waking up to who you really are and really coming home to yourself. And again, reaching that awareness of one, because since the beginning of time, we've been taught how to separate ourselves from each other, and we're so conditioned and programmed. And so I feel like the spiritual awakening, again, it's just coming back home and remembering. It's this whole remembering of everything that exists and all that is. And so I feel like a lot, and from experiencing this with my clients or my students, I feel like a lot of people are having these awakenings. Um, Sometimes it's happening through traumatic events, or I have a lot of clients right now that are getting diagnosed with different illnesses like cancer or these illnesses that the doctors are like, I don't know what this is, but this is in your lungs or whatever. And so you also have a lot of people that are awakening because they're going through depression that they may not have ever experienced before, or maybe a traumatic breakup. So everyone's kind of having their awakening through different experiences. But I will say that I feel like there's always these waves of awakening. Like 2020 was a huge awakening for a lot of people, but I feel like right now, again, especially coming towards like election time, I feel like there's this and there's another mass awakening that's happening. And so people are like questioning what is life? Like, what is really going on? They're starting to do research. They're starting to go down these rabbit holes or, going down these like going and figuring out all these like conspiracy theories and stuff. And so I feel like there's a lot of questioning that's happening, but it's happening so that way we can shift our vibration as a collective and really ascend together. And so through that, I feel like a lot of people are tapping into what isn't them, what isn't serving them, and remember realizing like, oh my gosh, everything that's happened to me throughout my lifetime or even past lifetimes, it's happened to me for a purpose. And I'm supposed to transmute all of this into something and create it for the world and create something beautiful with it. And so that's where I feel like a lot of us are at right now, where we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I have these gifts, or I never felt energy before. Like, where's this coming from? Or, they're just rediscovering these different parts of themselves. And so a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, this is a blank canvas right now for us to create something and co-create it together. And so, yeah, I kind of feel like that's where we're heading right now because you see all of the systems collapsing and crumbling
Oh yeah.
and it's all for a reason. And I guess that's what I realized with my awakening and the oneness in it. Because again, I was so mad about the dark and I was like, oh, I can't believe the government's been sorry, I think I got a call. I can't believe the government's been lying to us. And, we can be mad all we want, but at the same time, it's all serving a purpose and it's helping us wake up. Like, we need to know what the dark is for us to be the light. And so it's like, okay, we can get mad and fight it all we want, or instead we can channel our energy into creating something better.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's where we're at right now.
I love that you said that. Yeah. And I love having these kinds of conversations, like I find it fascinating how so many people just go about their lives and, oh, let me go to work and let me do this. And they don't, it's like, dude, we're just here. Like, what is this? Like, why are we
Hmm.
here? I've always, as a kid, just like spent so much time in nature, just like into my adult life, just looking around, just pondering, like deep in thought. Like I think I'm more a philosopher than anything. And I just think a lot about life and what's the meaning of life. And I think it's funny how some people just don't wonder about these things, and I'm always saying, this reality, this life is just, it's so mysterious and it's so
Hmm.
magical. And when you open your eyes to it, you wake up, you have that awakening. And I like what you said about the darkness too. I feel like there's a lot of, people in the spiritual community sometimes who just focus so much on the light, just everything, sunshine and rainbows. And it's like,
Hmm.
in reality, dude, spirituality is dark, man. It can get dark. Like when you're facing your traumas, and like when I was in that ayahuasca retreat, I was just sitting there in that room and I was staring at the fire. And I was just like, I saw the darkness of,
Hmm.
the different people crying, letting out their traumas. And I wasn't afraid of it. That's how I felt. Like I was just like, I was looking at the darkness and I still was loving it. Like, love the darkness. Like the darkness,
Yes.
I feel like the darkness just forgot about where it comes from, the light, and so that's kind of my view on it. And I've always had such a resonance with the yin yang symbol. It's like
Yeah.
we're so like, it's this reality, it's either this or it's that. It's like this reality, it's everything. You got day and you got night. It's light and it's
Hmm.
dark. So it's all part of the experience. It's all encompassing.
And that's crazy that you say that because I had this moment where I was in meditation. This was probably like 2021, where because I used to like be the one exposing the dark. Like I was just so like, you guys need to wake up. Like, how do you not see that this is happening? And so I would post and I would get shadow banned and like it was such a mess. And I remember being in this meditation and I met the darkness and it was literally telling me like stop trying to fight me, like be one with me and know that we are on the same team, like we're working together. Again, you need to know that everyone needs to know that there is dark so that way you can be the light. And so stop putting so much energy towards exposing me and instead like use me so that you can shine brighter. And I was like, dang, this is wild. And so much shifted for me when I stopped putting so much energy going down these rabbit holes and trying to like get my family to wake up or
Yeah.
the friends and everyone on social media. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy.
Yeah,
So,
I love that you said that. It was like similar for me. Like after my ayahuasca, like I felt like awakened and enlightened, and I was riding that high of awakening and enlightenment. But I still was like, I don't get it. Like I don't understand the darkness. Like I still like I don't get it. Like why? The thing that triggered me is I would see these musicians sometimes where it's like you say you in conspiracies. I've always been into conspiracies. How they say they sell their soul to the devil
mhm.
and they're doing all this satanic worship and all that, and it would trigger something to me, and I would want to start arguing with these musicians like why are you doing that? Like you have a platform here, you shouldn't be doing that. Like I would want to argue with them, and I was in a deep reflection one day where I was just I came to that realization. I was like, you know what, like it's part of the experience too. It's like it's
Mhm.
part of it as well, and they're on that journey, and they have to, they have to learn. One day they'll learn, you know what I mean? Like don't worry about them, like focus on me and my journey and try to just go towards the light. That's all we can really do, and
Yeah,
try to guide people.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, how has your understanding of spirituality evolved throughout your journey?
I guess it's as far as it evolving, I feel like again in the beginning, it was still like, okay, I reached this awareness of one, but then I still was living in separation again by, it being the light versus the dark. And so I guess the evolving happened when I was like, okay, stop fighting, like, live in the awareness of one, but also like in the human experience, there needs to be separation. Otherwise, like, there's no point of it all. And so I guess it just evolved with just me being my authentic self. I guess spirituality for me is being who you truly are, no matter what that looks like. It doesn't, and I guess like the spiritual community, and you kind of mentioned it before, like there's a lot of the love and the light out there. And so for me, I'm like, I just need to be myself, whoever I am in this moment, like that's spiritual, just living my truth, being who I am. And so, I don't, a lot of people will look at me and they're like, this is crazy. Like, I didn't know that spiritual people could, talk like you or look like you or be into the things that you're into. And I'm like, but what does that even mean? Like spiritual people. And so I guess my spirituality has evolved from being more of like what's expected of us. Cause then I was like kind of like, okay, this is almost turning into religion, like having to bring sage to a session or light Palo Santo before, or to listen to this type of music or to preach these words to people so that they know I'm spiritual. And so instead, it's like, no, F all of that. I'm just going to be who I am. And me being who I am unapologetically is inspiring everyone around me to show up as they are without the expectations of feeling like they need to perform or be this love and light person to be considered spiritual. So I guess in that sense, that's how it's evolved for me is coming back to just who you are.
Awesome. I love that. And I love what you said too. It's like, talking about light and dark and all that, right? It's like, what experience would this be if we were already awakened, we were already enlightened, we were right there at the foot of God? And
Hmm.
there would be no experience in that, like you'd get bored of that, you know what I mean? It's like, so that's exactly what this reality is. It's the whole experience of going through the darkness and facing your traumas and your fears and transmuting that into light. And that's what makes the whole experience.
Yeah, no, literally. And I remember in one of my trips, like that it was like it was presented to me like, do you really want to do this human experience or would you rather just come back to the one? And so I got to feel what both were like. And I was like, I chose to come here to create because that's what we're doing with every moment. We're creating reality through our energy. And so I was just like, no, I want to have this human experience. And so therefore, again, you need to have that separation. And let everything play out. And then I like had this realization. I'm like, this is what source is. Like source literally was just the one. And I always like laugh about it, but it's also kind of true. Like, what is the point of all of this? And it's almost like source was just bored and like, let me create,
Yeah.
let me create something so I can have
Yeah.
fun. And that's what it all is. So at the end of the day, it's like we shouldn't have to take all of this so seriously because again, it's all an illusion. But then if we live our days like, oh, none of this matters, then it's like there's no point. So it's like
Yeah.
make it matter for this experience.
Yeah, I love that, and in my ayahuasca journey, man, like it was the most profound experience of my life. And I literally had an experience of dying. I died.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it was like, I think God, source energy, they refer to it as the, madre ayahuasca, the mother plant spirit, whatever that was. I saw that entity. It was, it was like, it was, intense patterns and vibration and whatever that was. I almost feel like it was like in that experience of dying, it was like God, like I said, whatever you want to call it, took life from me. And it was like, all
Hmm.
right, like you want to be depressed. What are you depressed about? And it was like, all right, let me take life from you. And it was like, I remember I was in the void, like it was just pitch black, and
Yeah.
my consciousness was still there. And I was like, oh, like I just died, like, and there was nothing, no sound, just pitch black. And I was like, am I going to come back from this? Like, all right, I was like begging. I was like, please, all right, like let me come back, And then a little light kind of in that void, in that darkness, a little light came, and then next thing I know, and then I was back, and I was like, okay, and then just I have so much more appreciation for life after that.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah, I was
yeah,
very similar to that. So it's
okay.
wild.
So what were some of the challenges that you faced while overcoming depression and anxiety?
I guess some of the challenges that I faced was not knowing like where, I mean, it was like I feel like I knew it was coming from, my parents being divorced and my dad leaving, but I felt like whenever I would talk about it, like to my family or even in school, it was like no one took it seriously, I guess. It was kind of just like, oh, like you're fine. And I remember like there was a point in time where I would cry all the time and like my grandma would just, it was like I never was like comforted or what's really going on with you? Like, let me understand. And then I got to college and finally was like, no, like I can't even focus in school. And so my mom took me to the doctor and they diagnosed me with ADD and then anxiety and depression. And so they gave me a bunch of meds that I shouldn't have been taking together anyways. And so that made me feel super crazy, like even worse. And so that's when I started to question like the healthcare system because I was like, you guys are just passing over a bunch of drugs to me and you don't even
Oh
want to
yeah,
know like what's actually going on, like what's going on through my head. And I
oh yeah,
remember like even at the age of 12, I remember wanting to commit suicide and talking to a friend about it who ended up telling my mom and my grandmother. But I'm like, that's crazy that even at that young of an age, I was having those type of thoughts. And so I think that was like the most challenging thing is like feeling like no one could actually hear me or see, okay, she is really going through something and having to find my own way out of that, which happened, on my own. Like no one
mm,
really pulled me out of that. That was all my own inner work that I
yeah.
had to do. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I know these are tough topics to talk about, but I definitely feel like the healthcare industry, it really is just kind of putting a band-aid on things. It's
Hmm.
like it's not really getting to the core of the issue and really healing it. And that's what I found with, plant medicine and therapy and spirituality is really it's not putting the band-aid on it. It's going to the depths, going to the core of it, healing it, and that's what we all need to be doing. Um,
Yeah.
so I'd like to ask you, so like talking about your platform, one, what are your long-term goals for it?
Yeah. So my long-term goals, so when I had like my whole awakening and had that realization of like, you're here to create new systems, um, over time, one came about and it was this whole vision of like being this incubator to create new businesses or organizations or just new systems, like either reforming or creating a new system for healthcare that has a holistic approach. Same with education. Like I see it, building schools and building new markets with real food. And so again, really just being this like central incubator hub for everything new that's actually going to support humanity on all levels, not just, spiritually, but I guess spiritually that encompasses everything, but physically, emotionally, mentally. And so right now, like the very first thing that I'm working on is developing an app. And so this app is going to shape the way that we're learning education and then wellness as well as social connection. So I'm excited to share more about that, but that's like our starting point is this app. And so with all of the revenue from, businesses that we do launch, we'll be able to put that into co-creating the world that we want to bring in. So
Awesome. Sending you much blessings. I love to hear it. Yeah, I was also thinking, I'm affiliated with a co-working space. They have one in Pasadena, one in Rancho, and they have a third one opening in Covina. So maybe we can talk, more, offline or whatever, and maybe do like a sound healing at one of the event spaces or something. If you're interested, I'll
yes.
talk to them about it.
That sounds dope. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely let me know.
Yeah. Okay. So have you encountered any mystical or profound experiences while doing sound therapies?
So during sound therapy, I have experienced a lot internal experiences. As far as like witnessing things through like my clients and stuff, I have seen some pretty trippy things, like these breakthroughs that happen through the body. For example, that can look like it's almost like experiencing someone about to have this outer body experience, and you just see so much movement in their body, and then afterwards them coming back and through integrating it being able to tell me like, wow, I had so much energy just stored in my body that was ready to leave, and so they were able to do that through this movement that they really couldn't control. And then for myself, I just through sound, I feel like it brings me to this place where I am one with everything, and so I'm able to connect. But I do this even without sound. I can do this on my own. It's just like, whether it's connecting with other entities or higher dimensional beings, or, going and traveling to different timelines, or even like doing like remote viewing, or having loved ones that have passed come visit me. And so, it's pretty crazy what can happen during a sound healing session. And then, like I said, even without the sound, it's pretty crazy, like the things that I am able to experience as well.
Awesome. I love that. So I'd like to ask you, what role does self-love play in the healing process, and how can people cultivate self-love in their daily lives?
Yeah, so I feel like like self-love is the starting point. You have to choose to love yourself, and that starts everything else for you. Like once we make that decision, like, okay, I'm gonna love myself, that doesn't mean just love the parts that you already love, or like, oh, I love my looks, or I love how happy and joyful I am, or how I can, make friends. It's loving all aspects of yourself. So it's, doing that shadow work, or getting to know those dark parts of yourself and giving it love and being like, hey, I see you, I feel you, like you're here for a reason. And so I feel like self-love is that opens us up to just being, instead of like always trying to become this or become that. Instead, we can come to a place where like we can just be and also be our authentic selves. But then again, like I said, every single day, like just making that choice, and I love myself and I'm going to prioritize myself and pour into myself first, then that's how we can continue to inspire others to do the same. That it's like us shining our light, and then everyone else is like, oh my gosh, I love that light. Like, where's mine? And then they want to go and find their light and turn it on within them as well. And so it's this like beautiful trickle effect. The more one loves themselves, then we're able to pour out that love onto others, and they find it within themselves.
That's awesome. Well explained, So what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out on their healing journey?
For someone that's just starting out on their healing journey, just know that you're not alone. It can feel very lonely when we're going, on this path, especially when, the people around you may not understand the things that you're going through, or they may not be able to see you for who you really are, but just continue to go forward, move forward, and also again just like embrace all parts of yourself and know that it's all playing a role. Something that I always tell people is like life doesn't happen to you, it's happening for you so that you can eventually be a guide for others. And so when you are able to alchemize all of the hurt and the pain that you experience and turn it into something beautiful, it's like so worth it to go through this healing journey, and to also just know like there are people out here that are holding space and that want to support you on your journey. And so the more you show up for yourself and be your true self, the more we can find you.
Awesome. I love that. So kind of closing it out here. So how do you envision the future of your work, and what role do you see yourself playing in it?
The future of my work, I definitely see myself again having a bunch of schools and wellness centers and just many businesses. I don't even like to call them businesses, but just so many things to offer the world, and be able to empower folks to do the same, like lean into their calling and their divine purpose, and just be able to be a guide for them so they can feel empowered to do so. Because again, this journey is so scary when you're trying to create something that, the world is telling you, oh, that's not acceptable, or we can't do that. And so, yeah, just continuing to be that light and that guide for others. And I definitely just see myself continuing to share all of the knowledge and insights for everyone else.
Awesome. I love that. And I always like to close it out on a high note. So, can you send the listeners out there just a final message of love and healing, especially for the ones who might be struggling out there?
Yes. So if I can leave you with one thing, it's just continue to be you, even when it's hard to, or even when you feel like no one can see you, feel you, or hear you. Just trust that you are felt and you are heard, and just find that love within yourself because no one is going to love you as much as you can love yourself. And again, you will attract everything that's for you and that's meant for you. Just continue to show up.
Awesome. I love it. So, thank you so much, Soul, for meeting with me today. Thank you for providing such great wisdom and insights on this episode. I also want to thank the listeners for sticking around to the end. So, Soul, please tell everyone where to find your information, and I'll also add it to the description of the video.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram at Soul Created, and then all of my work is at www.soulhealing.life, and you can do one-on-ones or take a workshop with me. And I
Awesome.
definitely am open to connecting, so reach out and I'm happy to talk.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.